Hello, I am Jonathan Rosenfeld, and today on the Personal Injury Podcast, I am joined by attorney Nate Huey. Nate is an attorney in South Carolina, and he devotes a significant part of his practice to nursing home litigation. Nate, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
So, Nate, today I want to talk with you about the laws and regulations and issues that you're seeing in South Carolina nursing homes. You really have, boots on the ground when it comes to these facilities, and you are probably as in good a position as anyone to sort of give us your take on what you're seeing in terms of facilities in South Carolina, what's going on, what the issues are. And to begin with, I want to just talk about, some of the main cases that you are seeing in your law office in terms of nursing home, whether you want to call it nursing home abuse, neglect, or nursing home injuries, what the main types of cases that you're seeing.
Sure. It's kind of hard to believe, but at this point, I have been practicing nursing home litigation for over 2 decades, so I have seen about all of it. And the most common types of injuries that I see are people have falls and end up fracturing their hip or hitting their head, having head injuries. I see a lot of pressure ulcer or bed sore type cases, and those go hand in hand with malnourishment, dehydration. Oftentimes, those things can lead to infection, sepsis, death. Of course, there's the abuse cases, which are, you would hope, are fewer and far between, but we've seen everything from people verbally abusing patients and thinking it was funny and recording it and putting it on Snapchat, to physical abuse, to sexual abuse. I mean, anything that you can think of just about. But the main ones end up usually, like I said, sort of the falls and then the skin breakdown are the things that I see the most often.
And those are situations, again, when we're talking about a pressure sore, we see a lot of those here in Illinois as well. We're talking about, it's not, a lot of times when you use the term bed sore, a lot of times people are like, oh, they sort of roll their eyes, oh, it's a bruise or
Right.
something. But the truth is we're talking about a real significant wound. We're talking about real skin breakdown where the actual blood flow is, restricted, and the tissue actually dies and a open wound develops. And these sort of, as someone who's seen these cases, these are situations where people really have been neglected shift over shift, day after day, for extended periods. These things don't just happen, overnight, so to speak. They happen, due to systemic issues.
Absolutely. And it's very rare that these are not preventable. And it's often because someone is neglected, like you said, over shifts and over time. And then once it starts, it can get, to be very bad. And even after having done this as long as I have, it still makes my stomach turn to see some of those pictures. And times when I've been with the family, you can be in a room and the smell is just overwhelming, from having that, from the dead tissue and things. And nobody should ever have to go through that. So
now in South Carolina, each state regulates nursing homes, differently, and there's different agencies. But in South Carolina, who regulates nursing homes?
Sure. So there are the federal regulations, which Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, that are national. And then there's usually a state overlay. And so in our case, we call it DHEC, which is Department of Health and Environmental Control. And so they have a specific regulation that covers nursing homes. And in South Carolina, in order to apply to run a facility such as a nursing home, you have to sign an application under oath. And it says that you understand basically that regulation sets forth the minimum standards and agree to comply with it. And then the license itself says that the personal safety and well-being and care of the resident is the responsibility of the nursing home. So a lot of times they want to say that it's not, but it says it right on their license and their application.
So if a family has a loved one at a South Carolina facility, they maybe, suspect mistreatment. There may be an acute injury. They may have concerns about their care. And the family may be hesitant to contact an attorney, at some point, but maybe they are comfortable. But what would you suggest a family do if they see an issue at a facility?
Well, there's several things that can be done. If a resident is still at the facility, then South Carolina has a South Carolina Long-Term Care Ombudsman's office. And the ombudsman is a patient advocate, and they can go in unannounced and get into the files and interview people. And so often that's a good thing for the family to do immediately, because they can get in again before they have a chance. Sometimes when we get involved, and I'm sure you see the same thing, sometimes when I get involved, I may have a set of records that the family got early on. And then by the time I get to litigation, all of a sudden there's a whole different set of records, and they've filled out all the fall risk forms and they've changed a bunch of things. And so the ombudsman allows them to go in immediately as a patient advocate and do that. And then they can also complain to DHEC, who goes in and can also do investigations. However, I do agree with what you said. It's important that they also contact an attorney, because I've had cases where I've had one of the most significant cases I had, the ombudsman came in and said, well, we don't think they did anything wrong. And it turned out to be, a large 7-figure case. So you really ought to not limit it to one particular agency, but those are some of the avenues that you can do.
Now, assuming that the family has a situation where, their loved one has suffered a significant injury, or perhaps they've died from the injury, how long, each state has a statute of limitations, which basically sets out the time for filing a lawsuit. And, in Illinois, there's a 2-year statute of limitations. But what is the statute of limitations for bringing a nursing home case in South Carolina?
South Carolina, the statute of limitations is 3 years on private facilities and 2 years on facilities if they are affiliated with the government. So there's some nursing homes in South Carolina are government affiliated and have that 2-year statute, but the vast majority of them have the 3-year statute. And just like I'm sure it is in Illinois, there's also a discovery period. So in other words, if you didn't find out what they had done wrong until sometime later, then you could have the additional time added on to the end. So,
gotcha. And if they have a question, obviously, about the categorization of the facility or who owns the facility, I'm sure they can contact your office and you can sort of give them some direction in that respect, correct?
Absolutely.
So, in nursing home cases, in civil lawsuits, ultimately we're talking about, compensation in terms of monetary compensation, dollars and cents. If you're looking for, to get someone to do a specific thing, you may have to file a different type of lawsuit. But in civil litigation, you're basically going to be getting financial compensation. And in South Carolina, can you talk a little bit about the different types of compensation that may be available via a nursing home negligence case?
Sure. Well, if a case doesn't involve a death, then essentially it's just the same thing as if you were in a car wreck case. I always use those analogies because people can understand that. But you have pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life. You have a recovery for medical bills, for future medical care, for those types of things, disfigurement, whatever. But also, if there's a wrongful death component to it, then there's 2 different claims. Survival claim is the claim for those injuries, and then the wrongful death claim is the loss of your loved one and what that value is. And so there are really 2 separate and distinct claims depending on whether or not it is a death case.
And are there any caps in terms of compensation in South Carolina for nursing home cases?
There's caps put in place on the governmental nursing homes. There are some pretty strict caps that you can't get around, but on the private nursing homes or the for-profit nursing homes, there are some economic damages caps, which are essentially $350,000 per entity up to 3 entities. That has been adjusted for inflation since it was passed in 2005. But those do not include the medical expenses and those kind of things. So you can really get the numbers a lot higher. And then also, you can't have a cap on punitive damages, or if the nursing home changes the records with the intent to avoid liability, then there are no caps. And so there are a lot of ways to get around those caps in South Carolina, thankfully.
Nate, this was great information. If a family has a loved one at a South Carolina facility and they've got questions about their care or their legal options, certainly they can contact your law firm. We'll put a link up on the show notes. But thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. Great information. And I look forward to talking with you again. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right. Talk to you later, Jonathan.
Take care.